Hello, my name is Crystal Petry, and you are watching another episode of the Crystal Petry Podcast, Season 4. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by an extraordinary woman whose life reads like a thriller. Mitzi Perdue, author, humanitarian, war correspondent, and member of the legendary Perdue chicken family, has interviewed more than 150 victims of war crimes in Ukraine and is actively working to expose human trafficking and advocate for peace. At 84 years old, she survived an assassination attempt, earned recognition as an honorary Ukrainian police officer, and continues to speak truth in some of the world's most dangerous places. Mitzi Perdue, welcome to the podcast.
I absolutely adore being on. Thank you so much for including me.
Yes. So I am excited. Let's get into this podcast. First off, where in the world are you?
I am right now in Manhattan, in a wonderful apartment that I'm kind of borrowing.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, so you come from the family behind the Perdue chicken empire. How did that background shape your sense of responsibility and purpose?
Okay, I am part of the Perdue family. My last name is Perdue, but I also come from another business family. And am I allowed? Do you give me permission to mention both? Because my father was the co-founder of the Sheraton hotel chain.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and we sold it when he died, 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure of my math on that. 70 years ago. But both families put a huge effort in doing what my mother used to call, she wanted her children to be good citizens. She wanted them to, as she put it, put back in the bucket. That, if you've been fortunate enough to have wonderful things happen to you, you have a huge obligation to kind of earn it. Yes. And my father's favorite saying to me when I would ask him for something was, earn it. And the Perdue family, whom I admire endlessly, they put a lot of effort into not being spoiled, into being frugal, into, also being good citizens. Mm-hmm. Like you get your identity in both families, in my opinion. You get your identity through service, not through spending.
Oh, I love that. I love that you said that, Mitzi. Okay.
And let me add one other part to that. And it kind of surprises me. I don't know how the universe works that this happened to me twice, but that I come from one family that was a successful business family, and I married into another, that both had such similar values. Like most of us, until we're in our 80s, go economy. I mean, even Frank Perdue, when he was alive and heading a major company, up until when he was in his 80s, we would go economy class. Because you get your identity through service, not through spending. And by the way, what changed in his 80s was his doctor told him, you have to go first class because of health reasons. You need to, I don't know why the health reasons are, but somewhere around 80s, it's a really good idea to have more space and move more.
Oh, okay. And, I'll just say this, Mitzi, before I get to my next question. By the 80s, he had earned and deserved to sit in first class.
Oh, without doubt. But would you believe, by choice, our honeymoon was in Italy. By choice, we went economy class.
What?
Yeah, because you get your identity through service
not sales. I love that saying so much. Okay, so Mitzi, most people, including myself, I'm just going to be honest, with your background, your father, as I just learned, was the co-founder of the Sheraton Hotel Empire, which is, I feel like at this point, all over the world.
It was already all over the world at the time of his death.
You married into the Perdue chicken empire. Would expect for you to live a quiet life, just enjoy your life and enjoy the fruits of the labor. So what motivated you to step into the humanitarian and the global advocacy work?
Well, it certainly came from childhood.
Mhm.
I remember I'm not sure how old I was, possibly 10, 12, but young. And it was a Saturday, and we have a place in Dublin, New Hampshire, and it's near things like hiking and golf courses and tennis. And I go walking into my father's office, and there he is, Saturday afternoon, sunny, pleasant, and there he is working. And so I asked him, how come you aren't out playing golf like the daddies of all my friends? And he said he was working on charitable requests that had come his way. And he told me words that have echoed the rest of my life. He said, "The greatest pleasure my wealth ever gave me has been in giving it away."
Wow.
Is that not fabulous?
Yes, that is.
And Frank Perdue was the most philanthropic person I ever met, because he lived fairly simply also. We didn't live in a McMansion. We lived in a house where our neighbors were school teachers, police, in one case a businessman. But we didn't live in Millionaires Row. He could have, but we sure didn't. He gave away so much of his money, but under a condition that I find extraordinary. And here it is.
Mhm.
Over and over again, he's supporting, like, I don't know, the Girl Scouts, or I don't know, anything. And he would always have a string attached to his donation. And the string was, "You can't tell anybody."
Wow. That
And-
is so rare.
Okay, and there was one case where they talked him out of that, and that was the University of Maryland in Salisbury
Mhm.
wanted to have a business school, and he was all for supporting it, with lots of money to help found a business school, and he didn't want it named after him. He didn't want it known that he was making this donation, and they told him, it's really, really important that we get to use your name, because we will attract good business school students just because of the name.
Mhm.
And so he moved to it. But it was kind of against everything he always did otherwise. I mean, he didn't give for the purpose of vanity.
Yes. And I'm sure, Mitzi, you know that that's very rare, especially in today's time. Everyone wants to be known for everything that they do.
Okay, and I'm not against that. If it motivates anybody, God bless and go forth.
Mhm.
But sometimes I don't make donations in the scale that Frank did, but I don't want people to know either. Well, actually, I'll tell you, but
Yes.
but in general, I just assume that my name not be attached to a gift.
Yes. Okay. So when did you start focusing your humanitarian efforts started as a child? When did your efforts towards Ukraine start?
Oh, that started as a result of another somewhat humanitarian interest that I have, which is I am a writer by trade.
Mhm.
I've been writing syndicated columns, starting out with Scripps Howard for, good Lord, it's more than 40 years. It's 46 years. So I've been a writer most of my adult life. And somewhere around 10 years ago, more or less, I became aware of the issue of human trafficking. And I thought this is just one of the most horrible things I ever heard, particularly sex trafficking. And so I began writing on that. And then in 2022, a few months after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, a story came to my attention that I wrote about, and it was how the global traffickers converge on conflict areas because there are vulnerable women there. And Ukraine was just like the absolute example of this, that the traffickers of the world were just converging on the borders. So women who were leaving Ukraine, and typically they're desperate. I mean, their home's been bombed, their husband may or may not live, they don't speak the language. They're just so vulnerable. And the human traffickers, imagine that you're one and you've traveled 4 or 5 days on foot, a good bit of it, to get to the border, and you've waited 6 hours in line, and finally you cross, and you're exhausted, demoralized, traumatized, and you don't speak Polish, which is where you would cross the border. I mean, you're Ukrainian, you speak Ukrainian, you don't speak the language of this new country that you're in. You don't know what's going to happen to you. You don't know, where your next meal's coming from, but you had to get out of Ukraine because you're being bombed. Well, you cross the border, and this kindly looking elderly man comes and says, "You look as if you could use a hot meal. I can find you a place to stay, and I've gotten loads of girls' jobs. The van is leaving in 5 minutes, so get in right now." And that person is very typically a human trafficker, and he's probably trafficked hundreds of women.
Wow.
Anyway, so I wrote about that. And then, from just the most wonderful good fortune from my point of view, as in it's life-changing, I wrote that story. I frequently write for Psychology Today. And I wrote that story for Psychology Today. It was printed in July. And that story reached the desk of the chief of police for the Kyiv region. And he has about, at a guess, 10,000 people under him. So he's a big deal. But he had written his master's thesis on human trafficking. Really? So my story, it had the word trafficking in it and the word Ukraine in it. And somebody put it on his desk, and he called me by Zoom to invite me to come see for myself what I'd been writing about. And he said, "If you'll come, you can be our guest for 6 days. We'll show you around." And this is in the midst of the war. And 10 days later, there I am in Kyiv. And I spent my first night in a bomb shelter, by the way, because Kyiv was under active attack. And that's how I got involved with Ukraine. And I've been back 5 times, and I'm looking forward to going back my 6th. And I always go at the invitation of the Ukrainian police, because as a writer, I want to write stories that not everybody else is writing. And I think, maybe it's changed very recently, but at least for the first several years, I was the only Western or maybe American writer who had the police as their beat. So I would be writing stories that other people wouldn't have. And some of the stories, I don't know if it would surprise you or not, but it's the police who document war crimes. So, boy, I did
not know that.
I've gotten to interview hundreds of war crimes victims, but they play a role in demining, as in a landmine that you step on it, it's going to blow you up. They play a big role in that. And then something, again, that's not widely known, but I find fascinating. They're the ones who track the propaganda that we in this country get from Russia that makes us have a very distorted view of everything. And the cyber police are tracking that. And good Lord, the Russians spend so much money on getting us all to put, I'm using an expression I heard from the Ukrainian policemen. Their goal, the Russians' goal, is to weaken support for Ukraine and to get us, quote, all riled up. They want us at each other's throats, because the more we're mad at each other, the less we're able to focus on outside the U.S.
You have been to Ukraine 5 times, expecting to go a 6th. You've interviewed over 150 victims of war crimes. What is that emotional toll on you? Or is there an emotional toll on you?
Well, you've hit on a question that I ask myself all the time. Why? If you're a human being, and I trust that I am, when you hear some of the things that human beings did to each other, and I think, I'm voluntarily putting myself in hearing just tragedy and suffering. And why do I do that? And as I said, I ask myself this all the time. But would you believe, just this morning, I was interviewing a Harvard Medical School psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
And I was interviewing him for a story, but his specialty is refugee trauma. And he kind of almost explained to me what I believe to be true, which is when I listen to somebody's story, and this is his words, not mine, although I believe it. He said it's healing to them because when you've been the victim of a war crime, you want justice. You want people to know what was done to you. You want to know the evil of the other. You want their evil to be exposed. And he said that it's healing for them to be heard and know that it matters. And I always felt when I'm interviewing somebody as a human being, I care. I mean, it tears me apart. But I do have the feeling, and the Harvard professor kind of validated this feeling, that it's helpful to them, it's healing to them. It gives some meaning to horrible suffering. And so I guess I feel a little bit like a doctor. I mean, it's really presumptuous of me to say this, but I bet you're into truth, so I'll go tell it. I feel at the end of, I've talked with somebody for half an hour and heard about multiple rapes and tortures and, horrible things. But at the end of it, it almost always ends with hugs and sometimes tears. And I think many people want their story to be known. And I have the huge privilege of being able to write about it and get it published. So I guess that's such a long answer. I can give you a shorter one. The shorter one is, I think stories need to be told, and I think it helps the people whose story is told.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I'm right on that.
When you first started interviewing survivors in Ukraine and writing these stories, Mitzi, what surprised you the most?
The absolute inconceivable cruelty of man to man. In my normal life, I don't come across cruelty on this stage. I'll give you a quick example. A psychological principle, one of sort of the atomic bomb of emotions, harmful, tear you apart emotions, is humiliation. So here's one of the women that I interviewed. She was raped. Rape's a terrible thing, but
Yes.
the Russians add a twist to it. By the way, she was raped multiple times. She was gang raped, but they made her husband, two great big brawny Russian soldiers are holding her husband while they gang rape the wife. And what that does to a marriage. And I'm going to try to do my best to explain something that I think I know about Ukraine, and I won't do it justice, but I'll try. My impression is that in Ukraine, rape has a different psychological layer than we have in this country, because there's extreme shame for the woman, and for the man, it's almost one of his major roles in life is to protect his woman. And so when he's watching his wife being raped, she's humiliated by being raped, and he's humiliated to the end of time by watching this. And they're perfectly likely to let the couple go after they're done with them. But can you imagine what it does to a marriage and to the family and to the children and to the neighbors and everything else when, the devastation of it, and again, try to put yourself in a foreign culture where the culture is the man is supposed to protect his wife, and he doesn't. It's just if it's true that the atom bomb or the nuclear bomb of emotions is humiliation, both. How do you ever get over that? And the Russians do it deliberately. This is one of their.
I was going to say, yes, they do that on purpose, knowing what's going to happen after.
Yeah, that the people are just kind of psychologically broken, or their goal is to break them.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay,
And,
so
and I, as a writer, want people to know this is, people say, why don't you just, there are people who have said to the Ukrainians, why don't you just give up and get taken over? Well, because there are people like that who will do things to you. Um, or one of the things that I wrote a lot about. In fact, I'm told I'm the one who broke this story, and this I wrote about it the first year of the war. And this I know because it's the police who monitor this. The Russians very deliberately kidnap children. They take them from orphanages, they take them from summer camps, they take from schools, and they take them to Russia. They destroy all their papers. They move them far away, like 5 time zones away, so that the parents can never get them back. And those children are brought up as Russians. They're told, and I've actually interviewed people who've been rescued from this, they're told that their parents gave them up, that their parents hate them, that Ukraine's a terrible place and Russia's a wonderful place. Can you imagine losing your child and having your child trained to hate you?
Wow. These are the stories, Mitzi. I'm so glad you're on this podcast that we do not hear about on the news. They're not reporting these stories. And it could just, maybe they don't know about them. I don't know. Maybe they don't have the access that you have with
the thing is, okay, my impression, I certainly admire other people in my profession. I don't want to ever say anything negative about any of them. But I will say that as somebody who always goes as a guest of the police, I get to hear some of these stories that others might not hear, because again, it's the police who document war crimes.
Yes.
And it's a total war crime to kidnap children and take them away from their country and raise them in a foreign country. But it's the Ukrainian police who have these records. It's I can't take any credit for the fact that that the police are my beat in Ukraine. It's just I wasn't smart enough to choose it. It's the good luck from my point of view as a journalist that a policeman read my story about human trafficking and invited me to come, and that just opened a world that would never have happened otherwise.
Yes. But it also shows that they trust you and they value what you have to say.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
No, to me, it's. I mean, it brings tears to my eyes to think that they do trust me with their stories.
Now, you have also been trying to help broker peace. What does that look like? What does that effort look like from your perspective?
Okay, I've got to say that I wish for peace, but I have a somewhat different view from some of the people who are advocates for peace, and I respect every one of them. But I'm not a peace at any price person. I think that peace which rewards Russia for what it's done, or leaves territory in the hands of people who will mistreat the Ukrainians that are there, I'm not for that. So I think I want peace as much as any normal person does, but not at the price of. I think that there's things worse than continuing the conflict, and that is supposing the Russians take over another area. What happens? Well, here's what happens. Here's what they've done in the past. They kidnap all the children that they can and send them to Russia. They steal the houses, the factories. Very, very typically, when they take over a town, and I've interviewed people in towns where this has happened. I've interviewed them after the towns are liberated. When they take over a town, they have something called the murder list. The murder list is they have a list of all the leaders, whether they're political leaders, administrative leaders, church leaders, teachers. They'll just go out and kill them. and put them in mass graves. They don't want anybody left who has the authority or the following to resist them. Like in the town of Bucha, I'm not sure of the figures on this, but I think that a mass grave that I saw, that there were 400 people who had just been mowed down. So when Russia takes over, it's not like, I think we in the West imagine that people are like us, that we're kind, and that we have the rule of law. But that's not how the Russians are. The brutality and the cruelty is foreign.
Yes. I'm so happy to have you on here, Mitzi Perdue, war correspondent, journalist, and just amazing humanitarian. What do you believe, since you've spent time in Ukraine, you've wrote the stories, you've interviewed the war crime victims, what do you believe is the biggest obstacle to peace?
Well, if I were in charge of everything, and thank God, thank heaven I'm not, because, but I'd give the Ukrainians every possible ways of driving out the Russians possible. I mean, I'd give them all the weaponry that I could, all the intelligence. I would not hold back anything, because the longer it drags on, the more suffering there is. So I'm thinking of one Ukrainian, when I asked the question of him that you just asked of me, what with peace? And he said, more Abram tanks. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, the more weaponry we have to drive them out, the sooner it's over. So I guess I sound like a warmonger rather than somebody who cares about peace. But to me, peace at the cost of having Russia still benefits from its crimes is worse than keeping on fighting. So let's short I guess and again, I'm glad I'm not in a position of responsibility. I'm just giving you one citizen's opinion.
Correct.
But I think the faster that this war could terminate, the better. And but I'll tell you what some Ukrainians say about, and this is quite recent, like within weeks, because I talk with people in Ukraine almost every day, that there is a strategy that could bring Russia to its knees. And that is, we're getting into a great big geopolitical chess game, but Russia keeps afloat economically, it keeps going by selling oil.
Okay.
And right now, it can sell oil to something called the shadow fleet, that reputable licensed oil tankers, because of sanctions, they don't carry Russian oil. For the most part, they don't. I'm speaking in generalizations, but what I'm going to say is in general true, that Russia moves most of its oil by a shadow fleet of 1,000 oil tankers. Now, these tankers, they tend to be 20 or 30 years old. They would have headed to the scrap piles if there weren't the war. Well, they can carry enough oil to keep Russia in business, having a good's the wrong word, having a lot of money. With Venezuela taken off the map, they were one of the biggest sort of organizers of the shadow fleet. So with them gone, and with their oil not funding China and Russia, that's a great big dent in Russia's income. Now with Iran, the two biggest countries that controlled the shadow fleet, Venezuela and Iran, both of them are getting taken offline. And that means an incredible amount of money that Russia is not going to get. You know, I hear people say the price of oil's gone up, that's going to benefit Russia. A little bit, but what's really going to harm them is they can't sell their oil with the shadow fleet out of business. So I have talked with people in Ukraine who say, it's not going to happen like tomorrow, though I wish it would, But if you can't pay your troops, if the banks are failing, if you can't buy foreign parts, Russia will fall. The only thing is nobody can say when. I mean, does it fall? I wish it would be tomorrow, but does it fall in half a year? I don't know. But I believe that taking Iran offline and Venezuela offline is a fatal blow to Russia. It's a fatal wound, but I don't know how fast it's going to happen.
Do you know, and I would assume that President Trump and the people around him understood this?
Of course, that's the plan. Yeah, I mean, Ukrainians have told me that this was, I heard this like half a year ago.
Okay.
The way to bring Russia to its knees is to cut off the oil supply. How do you cut off the oil supply? Who are the two biggest organizers of the shadow fleet? And this I have heard from Ukrainians.
Mm-hmm.
Are Venezuela and Iran. And you know something? There are people who I don't want to get political because I just don't. But anyway, I've heard people say that there was no plan behind this. What? I mean, of course it's planned.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that people who say there was no plan are people who didn't know that there was a plan.
Those are the exact people. Now, I did not know that this was a big part of the plan, but I knew there was one. I just didn't know what the overarching plan was. But, if this works out the way you are speaking about, Mitzi, that would be very good for the Ukrainian people and country.
I have Ukrainian friends who are just like dancing in the streets with joy over what's happening in Iran right now. Because, some other things. With Iran, it was one of the torments of Ukraine is drones, particularly Shahed missiles.
Right.
Guess who supplies them? Iran. But that's not the end of the story. Russia has built huge factories in Russia to make Shahed. That's a particularly big, nasty drone. It's like I don't know if this is technically right, but here's how it looks to me, like a flying bomb.
Okay.
And that's not technically right, but that's how it looks to me. Okay, they have these, in Russia, they have these factories that will assemble thousands and thousands of these Shaheds, these flying bombs, but the parts for them come from Iran. So Russia has some of the parts to assemble, but if you get the electronics of it, you can't get them from Iran. That means, I suppose at some point they'll be able to assemble them themselves, but now their pipeline for getting the pieces for these drones is out of commission. And by the way, in Iran, a lot of the bombs that have been dropped in Iran, they've been targeting these factories that make the Shahed missiles and the missile parts. So I know an awful lot of Ukrainians who are just overjoyed that the Iran connection is stopping.
Wow. Again, information that is not widely reported. I'm going to have you back on here, Mitzi.
Oh, I'd love it. I mean, because I want to stories, because again, it's just happenstance that I have sources. And a wonderful thing. All right. Inside baseball story about being a journalist. To my mind, one of the factors that helps a journalist is if you get to know people. And so in Ukraine, I've gotten to know so many people because I write a story and that leads me to other stories. And pretty soon, I bet I've got a Rolodex of several thousand people in Ukraine so that I can ask questions. And can you forgive me some boasting for a minute?
No, please go ahead.
Okay, whether you forgive me or not, here comes. You mentioned in your introduction that I am an honorary Ukrainian policewoman.
Yes.
Okay, I'm so proud of that. But that came about, at least in part, because I got to lecture at the police academy. And is that not cool for an American heiress to get to lecture?
Your life is amazing, Mitzi. Amazing.
Well, I stand back and look at my life and think, yeah, that's a pretty big jump. But I did get to lecture at the police academy, and I loved it.
Oh, wow. Oh my goodness.
Okay, they also made me an honorary professor. Yay. But as a journalist, I was kind of leading up to a bigger point, which is, as a journalist, by lecturing or whatever, I just get to meet so many people. And then as a journalist, I record the names and the emails of people so that when I have a question, like I'm writing a story on drones right now. And because I know one person who is a drone manufacturer, I can call him and say, can you give me the names of 5 others?
Yes.
And they do, and then they will give me the names of still others. So I have a network of information sources that I'm proud of.
Let's change the subject a little bit here, Mitzi. You are the survivor of an assassination attempt. Explain to us what happened and how did you process that personally?
Oh, well, I'd love to tell how it happened. The third time I went to Ukraine, I was told that articles that I've written were really irritating to the Kremlin. And this is what people told me, is if you cover a battle and you say where the troops moved or whatever, that doesn't irritate the Kremlin terribly. I mean, I'm sure it irritates it some. But if you talk about emotional things like victims of war crimes, or what I told you, the story about the woman who was gang raped in front of her husband,
right?
Things that really make you sense how awful Russia is, that this is much more irritating to people in the Kremlin. And I had 3 different sources tell me not to go back the third time because I was on the murder list. And I even had somebody, this is very mysterious to me, but it happened. I had a person from whom I had met in China, in Shenzhen. Somehow he tracked me down, or still had my phone number, and called me and said, I need to tell you, don't go back to Ukraine because you're on the murder list. And then 2 people in this country, including a retired CIA officer who somehow knew about this, but 3 different people said, don't go. I decided to go anyway because I had this theory that there are probably 500,000 people on the murder list, and I was probably pretty far down, and why not? So I did. I went back. I was there for a week. The Ukrainian police, unasked by me, took this seriously because they gave me 4 bodyguards at every moment. Nothing happened. And that should be the end of the story, except it wasn't. I go back to get to Ukraine. You can't just fly into Ukraine. I think it's a 19-hour train trip to get to Poland, and then a 6-hour bus trip to get to Warsaw, where the airport is. So I made my way back to Warsaw, and I've checked in at the airport Marriott, and I have my key in my hand, and I'm walking towards the elevator, and then I see, standing by the elevator, a kind of tall guy, a woman with long, straight blonde hair. And as I walk towards them, I got this feeling, which, under normal circumstances, I wouldn't even believe in. You've heard of the Spider-Man sense, your Spidey sense?
Oh, yes, yes.
The thing where you just get this feeling something's really off. I had it so strongly, and I'm trying to talk myself out of it, but I couldn't. Don't get on the elevator with them. So I didn't. I looked at my watch. I pretended that I'd forgotten something. I walked away. I wandered around the lobby for half an hour. I come back to where the elevator was. They're gone. Yay, I get on. But then they get on the second floor. Oop. And then, now, in all honesty, I don't remember what I'm about to describe. There's
Mhm.
about a minute where I can't remember anything, but it's happened to almost 100 other journalists. So I know what happened for the part I can't remember. What they do when they want to inject you with Novichok is one of them bumps against you really hard and the other injects you. Or sometimes, according to what I've read from other journalists, or sometimes they have like a big heavy box and they drop it in your foot, and as you're the other
Right.
response. So you don't know when you've been injected. I didn't know when I was injected. I made my way to my room, 409,
Mhm.
and not completely unaware that anything had happened to me. But I get inside my room and I start having the most terrible trouble breathing you can imagine. I mean, like you're going to die, trouble breathing, wheezing, and each breath, it's like a boa constrictor is making each breath shallower. And I'm sitting on the edge of my bed and I'm thinking, this is really serious, because when you can't breathe, how about it's serious? And I know that I should roll over in the bed to the house phone and pick it up and say, help, can't breathe. I couldn't do it. But my fingers were still working, and I had my iPad on my lap, and I typed a Polish friend, help, can't breathe, room 409, Airport Marriott. And thank God he was there and got it and took it seriously. And he called the front desk. And then I'm alive today because the front desk guy, and I heard about all of this afterwards, the
Mhm.
front desk guy looked out the plate glass window and saw that in the driveway of the hotel was the airport ambulance. And that's just by coincidence, he happened to be there. Well, the desk guy went running out and said, woman in room 409 can't breathe. And that, whatever they were there for, if you can't breathe, that trumps that. So they came to my room and somebody let them in. And you expect when two strangers come into your room that say, are you Mrs. Perdue or something? No, they just leapt across the room and they smashed an oxygen mask over my face, and they grabbed my hand and they injected me, just, not wasting seconds. And I believe they thought that I was having anaphylactic shock, and this was epinephrine. It didn't do any good. They did it again, and again, it didn't do any good. And I'm just, going down fast. And the room was going dark, but I could still see the faces. And I'm a trained journalist. I'm trained to look at faces, and I could tell that now it's red alert. And I saw them going through their medical bag, and they took out the antidote to Novichok, which is atropine. I mean, I didn't read it, but I know what the antidote is.
Mhm.
And they injected me with that, and within, I don't have a timer, but it felt like a couple of minutes. All the wheezing, all the tightness. Suddenly, I could take a deep breath, and what happened afterwards was I was too sick to travel for like 5 days. I was sleeping like 19 hours a day. Uh, I, I would think that if you're in a hotel room, you could watch movies or read books or something. I was too
Yes.
sick to do that. But one thing that I noticed is I had this great big injection mark on my right thigh. It lasted for like a couple of months, still I don't mean months, weeks, just kind of red and angry. And at that time, I didn't know about injecting in elevators, but I was thinking, what could this be? Because it can't be a bee sting. It's much too big and angry. And a bee would have had to go through, a tunic and trousers, and
Yes.
no bee could do that. And so, in the moments when I'm sort of waking up, I'm wondering, what is this thing? Well, I'm finally well enough to travel back to the United States. And, immediately doctors are swarming all over me, and they discover that one lung isn't working right. I had inflammation of my gums so severe that a dentist told me, you're going to lose all your teeth, because when your gums are as inflamed as mine were, and I even know that was true because when you take a bite, it all felt squishy. I mean, I'm going to ask you right now to clench your teeth like this. Do it. Yeah, you hit something solid. I was hitting something like a pillow.
Oh, wow.
And then I had heart issues. My heart, it used to be normal for me was 65. It would never go below 100. It could go 110 or 120 or something. It just didn't stop. But the doctor said that you can see that your gums are bright red, but that's the tissues throughout your body are all inflamed. That's what's causing your heart issues. Well, in a couple of months, it all went down, and I didn't have any lasting effects. But I know some journalists who a year later can only work a couple of hours a day after a Novichok attack. In my case, there's no trace of it left. I've got my energy back. I can take a deep breath. The only trace is if ever I get a bad cold, I get it much worse because as a doctor, several doctors have explained, I've got minor microscopic damage, but nothing that interferes with daily life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what happened to me.
Wow, Mitzi, that story was amazing. Even though clearly I see that you made it from the assassination attempt, I was on edge, like, what is going to happen? You're an amazing storyteller.
Well, it was scary. Oh, except I have to add a detail, which is, thinking back on it, it's terrifying. But I have wondered, and sometimes somebody's going to tell me this, but I have read that in Russia, they have something like 10,000 researchers figuring out different kinds of poisons. 10,000. And I have wondered if Novichok poisoning is a common way of doing somebody in. In fact, a quick side story. Mm-hmm. The reason that in Poland that they had the antidote to they had atropine, the antidote to Novichok, is because the drug cartels in Russia and Poland are having a turf war in Warsaw, and they bump each other off with Novichok, and they're just dozens and dozens of dead bodies because Novichok is the ideal poison because after it's done its thing, there are no traces. A normal hospital just thinks, oh, she died in her sleep.
Yes. Wow. So, Mitzi, I could talk to you all day and listen to your story.
If you'll allow me, I left out why I mentioned the Novichok poisoning, and the drug cartels and everything. Since the Russians do this on an almost industrial scale, and journalists, not from the United States generally, but journalists are targets for them. I mean, we used to be a protected class, now we're targets. But I didn't feel as scared as I should have. Because when you can't breathe, it ought to be terrifying. Mm-hmm. And I remember feeling sort of detached. And how can you feel detached when you can't breathe? And I've wondered if they put in with the poison some kind of tranquilizer, because it doesn't make sense not to be terrified. I mean, looking back on it, I don't want to go through it again, but at the exact moment, I felt detached.
So, Mitzi, at 84, you are a journalist. You look fabulous. You are the survivor of an assassination attempt. Why do you keep doing this? What's your intention in this?
All right, this is really presumptuous, but here goes. Mm-hmm. I admire Mother Teresa when she said, the good that we can do, we must do. And I have the hope that the stories that I write, I can't know that even one of them will have an impact, but I can always hope that it will. So in case these stories, and by the way, right now, I looked up recently, there are more than 300 of them published since 2022. if even one of them does some good, then it's worth it.
I agree. I agree.
But then there's another part to it, which is I always imagined that getting older, you'd sort of wind down a little bit.
It does not seem that way for you.
Well, I've just discovered that I've always had a little bit of a taste for adventure. And that doesn't wind down even a little bit. I can't wait to go back.
So, do you have like a date or a plan for when you're going back to Ukraine?
I actually do, but I've been told that I shouldn't talk about it because,
Yes. Yes.
in fact, what I really should do is tell something really misleading.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going back on the 18th of June.
Right. Right.
Which is not true. I'm not going back the 18th.
No, or February 29th, which is not even a date. Yes, yes. Well, as we wrap up here, Mitzi, what an incredible conversation I have had with you. You are absolutely proof that courage, purpose, and determination don't come with an age limit. Your work documenting war crimes, fighting human trafficking, advocating for peace reminds us how powerful one voice can be. If today's episode inspired anyone in my community who's watching, who's listening, please share this episode. Follow the Crystal Petry Podcast for more conversations with leaders just like Mitzi Perdue, who's making a difference in our world. Mitzi, it has been my honor to have you on this podcast.
Well, it's been my joy to be part of it. Boy, you are such an A+ interviewer. You make me feel like I'm better than myself.
Thank you so much. That means so much coming from a journalist and coming from someone who interviews and does this for a living. So you know exactly what you're talking about. And I received that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to my community, you can get Mitzi's podcast and all of my other podcasts on YouTube Podcasts as well as Apple Podcasts. And remember, you always have time to listen and learn on the go.